the border with gas pipeline plans, a Middle Eastern woman, an Islamic refugee, which again goes to the heart of this debate about the border and the wall. This isn't just about Mexicans. This isn't just about illegal aliens. It's about ISIS. We know we've had reports of ISIS camps down there on the border in the past, and this is an open sieve through which they can come and wreak the kind of havoc that we saw in Orlando, Florida. And remember, if you actually look at the evidence, there's no way this guy could have done this on his own. You know, the amount of ammo alone he would have had to carry, the audio out of the gay club itself, 30 rounds being shot in a matter of a couple of seconds, the eyewitness reports of multiple shooters. Now, I'm not saying that it's a government false flag. What I'm saying is that this was more than likely a cell of ISIS jihadists that carried out this brutal attack. And you can compare it to the Bataclan incident, of course, in Paris. 80-plus people killed in that attack, not even double the amount. They had several individuals involved in that attack. They had more time in which to carry it out. They had more targets. They had a bigger arena. They didn't have a dingy, small little nightclub. So this stinks to high heaven. Basically, there's a cover-up going on. There were reports of the authorities looking to arrest other people. There was a report they were about to arrest someone. That's all been buried now. And again, it's this lone wolf perspective. Because if they allow that narrative to be expanded outside of one lone wolf, then it stops becoming about gun control, the Second Amendment. And they have to acknowledge that it's about Islamic terrorism. And in fact, Stefan Molyneux did an interesting interview with Mike Cernovich yesterday, former military guy, of course. And, he's coming out with a lot of that evidence. So I urge you to go and watch that video. But again, it stinks to high heaven. There were multiple shooters by the sounds of things, and they're covering it up so as to hide the fact that we have ISIS terror cells inside America. And the next attack is coming soon because Obama not only refuses to deal with the problem, refuses to even use the term radical Islamic terrorism. And we're going to get more into that after the break. But of course, I'm here in Britannia. We've got the big Brexit vote coming up next week. And Nigel Farage got on a boat, sailed down the Thames today. He was countered by people like Bob Geldof, the millionaire hypocrite, the champagne socialist, who is, of course, supporting to remain in the EU. And Geldof, and you can see this on my Twitter feed, actually stuck two fingers up at the fishermen who were on the pro-leave boat. So you have poor working-class fishermen whose lives have been destroyed, ruined by these EU fishing quotas that force them to destroy their own boats, in fact, pay them to do so, because they're not allowed to fish in their own waters. Completely decimated the fishing industry in Britain. So they're there protesting on a boat, sailing down the River Thames, and Bob Geldof, a champagne socialist, is there screaming vulgarities at them. And even the pro-Remain, the pro-EU people on that boat with Geldof left because even they were disgusted at his behaviour. So you've got a virtue-signalling champagne socialist lecturing poor working-class fishermen when they're the ones who are having their careers, their livelihoods, their very heritage destroyed. We'll be back on the Alex Jones Show after the break. Don't go away. So you have champagne socialist Bob Geldof, the biggest virtue-signalling hypocrite on the planet, on a boat on the River Thames in London, gesturing, making vulgar statements, insulting these poor fishermen who are voting to leave the European Union because their livelihoods, their jobs, their industry has been completely decimated by the EU Common Fisheries Policy, which means that, Norwegian boats, Dutch boats can fish in British waters just a few miles off the coast in places like, Newcastle up in the north of England. So, of course, the British fishermen are going to go out and protest. They're going to vote leave. And if you want to vote Remain and remain in a tyranny that creates over 60% of British laws and regulations without the British people even having a say in that protest. If you like dictatorship, then I guess that's your democratic choice. I mean, people voted for Hitler, right? They voted him into power. That's your choice. But to see Bob Geldof, again, a multimillionaire, a guy who is a complete fraud, a guy who came out at the start of the refugee crisis and said, I will house Syrian refugees on my own personal property. How many Syrian refugees did he house? The same number as Saudi Arabia? Zero. None. Because it's all BS. It's all hot air to make himself look good. Because he's a virtue signaller. He doesn't actually care about refugees. So now he's on a boat in London, leering at, gesturing at, sticking two fingers up, insulting these working class fishermen. And as I said, even the pro-Remain people who were on his side, the Labour people, left the boat. Even they were disgusted by his behaviour. So again, this is completely blowing up in their faces. The polls over the last 2 weeks have shown a huge shift towards the Leave campaign. And again, this is huge. This is a complete repudiation of the globalist agenda that they've painstakingly tried to build for decades. Bilderberg back in the 50s, creating the euro. You know, Etienne Davignon admitting back in 2009 that the euro single currency was a project of the Bilderberg Group. This is global government. This is taking away power from the people, our democratic will, coalescing it, centralizing it into this federalized tyranny, this bureaucracy, represented by the EU Commission, which both creates and passes laws. The Parliament is completely ceremonial. The EU Parliament cannot vote down laws. It has no actual power. So that's what the pro-Remain camp will be voting for. Shackles and chains. And that's their choice. But to see this champagne socialist engaging in this kind of behaviour, directing it towards these fishermen who have had their livelihoods destroyed, absolutely vile, disgusting. But it's no surprise coming from someone like Bob Geldof, who is a supreme hypocrite like no other. And on that same subject, again, if you go to my Twitter feed, which is at Prison Planet, there's a picture there of London's new Muslim mayor, Sadiq Khan, who, of course, was elected after sharing a platform with an ISIS supporter 9 times. You know, once might have been a mistake, but 9 times, of course, he was criticised for doing that by David Cameron. Just a few weeks later, David Cameron was out campaigning alongside Sadiq Khan because they both support Britain remaining in the EU. So he's out there giving a speech for the pro-Remain campaign today, surrounded by, you can picture, probably like 2 white people, the rest are Muslims. That's his constituency, after all, in Tooting, which is not far from where I live, which you can go on Google Maps and look at it. You know, there's a mosque, there's a halal butcher, there's an Islamic bookstore, and there's not much else. It's one of those areas that has had this cultural enrichment, as many others have. But look at this picture. Go onto my Twitter feed. It's him giving a speech. He's surrounded by people. You will notice the people around him at the front are all men, Muslim men. The people at the back are all Muslim women, because segregation is liberal. Segregation is trendy. And we've seen this at past Labour events. They will have Muslim women on one side of the room and all the men on the other side of the room because they can't mix. And that's progressive. So again, he's campaigning for Remain. And in this very image, you see everything that's wrong with Islam, everything that's wrong with him being the mayor of London. Let's move on, though, because, of course, we had the horrific events on Saturday night in Orlando, Florida. And we've got the leftist media response, which is always to make apologies for Islam, the religion of peace. This article is up on Infowars.com. Regressive left blames conservative Christians for Orlando massacre. Argues that white Americans inspire more violence against LGBT community than radical Islamists. Yeah, right, because one single incident on Saturday night killed more gay people than decades and decades of supposed LGBT hate from the Christian right. Not that that's a good thing, but if you want to talk about violence, that one incident wiped it out completely in terms of the numbers. In a backwards twist of logic, regressive leftists have pinned the blame for the shooting at a gay nightclub in Orlando by a Muslim extremist who declared allegiance with ISIS, nothing to do with Islam, on conservative Christians. Writing for Think Progress, LGBT editor Zach Ford outlined his mind-bending theory that conservative Christian America is to blame for the massacre in two ways. Now, one of those ways is the fact that James Wesley Howell, this guy who was found in Indiana with guns and explosives and chemicals in his car, was on the way to a California gay pride parade. So that and he was white. So that proves that this Islamic terror attack was the fault of white Christians. Didn't care to mention the fact that the guy who was caught in Indiana was a gay man. That completely was omitted from the article. So he's basically saying, given that even so-called moderate Muslims support killing people, Ford also fails to mention that Howell is not a conservative Christian. As I said, he's in fact a gay man. Howell's ex-boyfriend and other acquaintances were interviewed by reporters and maintained Howell harbored no violent feelings towards the LGBT community. So again, his argument is completely eviscerated on that score alone. But this is the rhetoric that we're seeing in the aftermath. The rampant apologia for radical Islam every single time. Because, you know, as Milo Yiannopoulos said, the left has made its choice. It cares more about protecting the feelings of Muslims than protecting the lives of gay people. And part of that process is to deny that within Islam there's a violent hatred towards gay people, which is an admitted fact. 11 Muslim countries still execute gay people. Where is the leftist outrage about that? Well, it's non-existent because in the oppression Olympics, Muslims rank above gays. And God forbid, somebody might call them Islamophobic. Somebody might call them racist, even though Islam is not a race. So I did a flashback article this morning, which is posted on Infowars.com and got linked up on the Drudge Report. Islamic speaker admits killing gays is a belief held by moderate Muslims. In light of the massacre of dozens of people at a gay club in Orlando, it's worth revisiting the comments of Islamic speaker Fareed Qureshi, and this is in Norway, who admitted that the desire to see homosexuals killed was a belief held by so-called moderate Muslims. Now, this is in Norway. It's in a Western country. He's up there giving a speech in front of a packed house full of Western so-called moderate Muslims. He asked them if they support the execution of gay people as prescribed in the Quran. And if you're watching the live video stream on Infowars.com, you will see their reaction, but I'll talk to you about it after. Here's the clip.
Can we have this camera focusing on all the audience, sir? Can we have this camera focusing on all the audience? Because every now and then, every time we have a conference, every time we invite a speaker, they always can come with the same accusations. This speaker supports death penalty for homosexuals. This speaker supports death penalty for this crime or that. He is homophobic. They subjugate women, etc., etc., etc. It's the same old stuff coming all the time. And we always try to tell them, I always try to tell them that, look, it's not that speaker that we're inviting who has these extreme radical views, as you say. These are general views that every Muslim actually has. Every Muslim believes in these things. Just because they're not telling you about it, or just because they're not out there in the media doesn't mean they don't believe in them.